For too long, there have been atrocious injustices in our society and around the world. We like to think that we don't contribute to this, and we try our best to lift each other. But our best is not enough if we don't open our eyes to what is happening and see how our actions, intended or not, may be contributing to it. Staying silent is no longer an option, as we've seen from all the Black Lives Matters protests across the world and even here in Ireland. Joining me on the show now, not to give us answers, because as white people, it is up to us to seek them, but to share her experience of the past few weeks and of growing up as a Black person in Ireland, is makeup artist Elaine Cruz. Elaine, it is so great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
I need to start by saying, how are you? Because I know for me, these past couple of weeks have been tough, but it's completely different for you. How have you been?
I honestly, Sabrina, I feel like I could be a Ronan Keating impersonator with the amount of life roller coasters that I've been on the last few weeks. It's been intense. It's really difficult to explain because every day has brought a whole new plethora of emotions. But right here and right now, I'm good. Yeah. I'm really good. I've slept more. I've tried to hydrate.
Yeah, really important.
Yep.
Because it is tough, because all of a sudden, like, you know, you've had your experiences, which we'll talk about in a sec, but they've been your own personal experience that people now expect you, because you are a Black woman in Ireland, to just answer all the questions we have for you. And that is not, like, that's not your job, for you to lay your soul bare and for us to expect you to have all the answers. So how are you finding that?
No, it's not my job to answer anybody's questions, and it's not my job. It's not any Black person's job to be able to teach people about something that they've never experienced, and to teach them kind of, you know, what's the next step? What do we do? Because Black people don't have the answer. We don't have all the answers, unfortunately. If we did, this wouldn't exist, and oppression wouldn't have lasted, you know, from 1619 to now. So we don't have all the answers, but I don't feel like I'm obligated to lay my soul bare. I had a choice. I chose to speak out. I chose to take my phone and sit in my bathroom and sit on the loo for 5 minutes and tell my stories. And it's been it's overwhelming, but it's been really empowering. And this is probably one of the most vulnerable and the bravest thing that a lot of Black Irish people have done, is to speak out publicly. And I feel there is a sense of responsibility for those that have reached out to me personally, told me their stories. You know, I'm not here to put words in anybody's mouth. I am not the voice of Black Ireland. I am just one woman, one Irish woman. But I do feel a sense of responsibility to give voice to those who share their stories with me, and so many similarities of their stories, who don't feel like it's their time to speak out just yet. Because it's an incredibly difficult thing to do. So I don't feel a sense of obligation. I am happy to do it, because if my one voice can make even the slightest impact and the slightest difference to change and to just making Ireland a better place, and to open people's eyes a little bit to just humanity in general, that's not an obligation, that's an absolute privilege.
Yeah. Because a lot of people say, you know, oh, racism, it doesn't exist in Ireland. We're nothing like America. But you have, I was watching one of your videos and you were saying, but casual racism, that exists as well. So tell me about that and what that's been like for you.
I think Irish people have a very linear view of what racism is. We see racism as only Black and white. We don't see it as any other colour or any other nationality. But I think again, it's that assumption that racism is having the N-word screamed at you in the street, which does happen. It absolutely does happen.
Does it really?
It does. It does. My experience, I think, has been quite different. Again, I've been reading a lot of other Black Irish people's stories, and a lot of their experience is more recent than mine. Number one, because I'm old. I'm just old.
Older.
But
older.
Yeah. I'm good. I'm a little bit older than some of the generation of the stories that I have been reading. But also what comes into play as racism that Irish people don't understand is colorism. And it's, you know, when I was growing up, we were a very, very small minority, but Ireland has become so much more ethnically diverse, and there's so much more multicultural now that, in a way, because we were, you know, there was a small minority of us who were the blackest in Ireland, we got a really hard time for a long time. As the country has evolved and we have deeper and darker skin tones, there's colorism in Ireland, which is, I'm not the blackest anymore, so I'm okay. And it's acceptable to me to be my color because I'm hashtag tan goals for most Irish women. They want, I am the color that you want to come back from your holidays with, you know, after 2 weeks in Marbella with the girls. But it's the deeper, darker skin tones that, you know, they're getting the N-word screamed to them now on a daily basis, where that has eased off for me. But that's what Irish people have. I think they have an assumption that that's what racism is. But it comes in many, many forms. It comes as prejudice. And I think we forget what prejudice means, and we prejudge. People, as people, we judge other people, but we prejudge based on people's, their accents, their skin color, their hair texture. We pigeonhole people into stereotypes, and we forget, or we don't understand as white Irish people, that all of those things fall under racism. And the casual things that you ask have a racial undertone that you mean no offense by, but you don't 100% understand what it is that you're asking and what you're saying to people. I think where people really connected with my video was when I spoke about Irish racism. The one thing that I think most people that messaged me said was where you from? But where you from really? Where you really from? That resonated with so many white people, because the majority went, oh, I've done that. I've asked that because I'm nosy and I was just interested, but I don't understand what I did wrong or how I could have asked better. And I think that's probably the most common place that most people could identify within themselves. So I want to just, if you don't mind, Sabrina, take the opportunity to just roll with that and to just unpack that a little bit.
Please do.
When you are questioned about, when you ask an Irish person where are they from, they will say Ireland, because this is where we're from. The where you're really from, the first thing it does is it questions your identity. It leaves a massive question mark over your Irishness. I've been born and raised in this country. I am incredibly proud to be an Irish woman. So I am Irish first and foremost. And my skin color does not change that. However, the bigger picture when you ask that question is, the world is, I want to talk a little bit about white supremacy. And I think people automatically get their back up when they hear that term, because they think as white supremacists, it's neo-Nazis. And it's, you know, it's a really extreme view of racism. But to me, what white supremacy means is, white in Ireland is the status quo. You know, we have become much more multicultural, but white is seen as normal the world over. White is seen as normal, and anything else that is not white is other. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it feels like it's a racial attack, but it's a constant reminder that you do not belong and that you're not part of the normal, and you are always left to feel like you are othered. What people need to understand with that question as well is, if you ask me personally, again, not the voice of Black Ireland, but if you ask me personally, I will usually introduce myself and say, I'm Irish, but I'm also half Cape Verdean. And I'm happy to do that because I am really proud of both sides of my heritage. Even have my favorite cup today. But I'm really proud of that. Do I want to have that conversation with everybody I meet every day? No, it's exhausting. It's exhausting because it is the first question that every Black person is asked, and we're asked it by every person that we meet. So there are days where, yeah, I want to chat about the heritage and tell you about this incredible country that my family's from and how beautiful it is and about the culture. But if I meet 9 new people in a day, Sabrina, I haven't got the energy. I haven't got the energy to talk to you about that. But there's also you also need to understand that there is Black Irish people in this country who do not know their heritage, that may have been adopted, that may have not met the parent, their Black parent. So they actually can't answer that question for you. So you are triggering something that is incredibly deep and incredibly emotional for somebody by pushing that conversation. So my advice to anybody who wants to do better and be better is, if you ask where somebody's from, accept the first answer.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I have another question that I don't expect you to have the answer to, but it's a question that's been rolling around in my head for a while. And it's the term, because I think terminology is very important as well. And for me, the term that doesn't sit right with me is people of colour. Because for me, it assumes that white is the colour and that every other colour is a person of colour. Like, is that a term? How does that term feel for you? Because as I said, I don't expect the answer, but something that I've been grappling with, like, why is white the colour and then everybody else is a person of colour?
Because white is the status quo. And I've got a couple of thoughts on that. The reason why I think that can feel uncomfortable for people is, white is the colour, because race is a social concept. Race is not a real thing. Genetically, there is very minimal difference between you, I, and everybody else, regardless of colour. Race is a social construct. It was created, I think, the 1700s to put people into categories like species. So there was white, which was the majority, which is superior, and everything else is other. So I think that's where that terminology comes from originally. I think, again, it's people are so cautious of tiptoeing around terminology and being PC. From personal experience and from what, again, I'm a makeup artist, so race for me, race for any Black person is always a topic of conversation, because we wear it on our skin. We wear it with pride, but we wear it. So we don't get to opt out of this conversation. We've never been able to. We are this conversation. But in the makeup industry in particular, it is my job as a makeup artist, and it's every job, as every makeup artist's job, to look at skin, to speak about skin, to look at skin texture, skin color, undertones. It's part and parcel of our everyday job. It's the job spec. But the issue that I've had over the last, I've been in makeup since 2008, and I've been a trainer and an educator for 2 really prestigious brands. Part of my job was to educate and teach people about makeup. And the one thing that has always been my narrative for the last, 12 years in makeup is, Black is not a dirty word. There's a fear of saying Black, of saying, like, there's a girl over there, that you almost like whisper it because it's seen as being a dirty word. What people think they're doing is, I don't want to offend anybody. But what people need to sit with now is, why do you think that's offensive? Why does calling a Black person Black feel offensive? So that's something that you need to sit with yourself and really ask yourself some hard and some honest questions as to why that feels wrong. I'm calling a Black person Black. They already know. It's like calling a blonde person blonde. It just is. That is what we are. But if it makes you uncomfortable and it doesn't sit right in your mouth, that's a question that you need to ask yourself.
Talking about questions, during the week there was an initiative that happened in America and then happened here in Ireland, where it was share the mic, and you shared the mic with Aisling Keenan, and you got to take over her Instagram and talk to a whole heap of new followers. And a few things that you said struck me, but the first one was, again, I'm not here to answer your questions. I actually have questions for you. What questions do you have for us?
I think I don't have questions for white Irish people. I don't have questions for white people. My questions are questions to ask yourself.
Yeah.
Because we cannot make change unless everybody sits with themselves and has a look at what they've been complicit in, what part of this conversation that have they personally taken part in? You know, the questions that I asked on that day when I took over Aislinn's page were questions that you need to ask yourself, because I don't have the answer. So
Yep.
exactly like I just said, if black feels uncomfortable in your mouth, you need to sit and ask yourself why. The questions that I've asked is to try and open people's eyes to the world, how black people see it, because white supremacy means that the world is viewed through white eyes, and you are first and foremost because you are the normal and everybody else is other. So I asked questions on Aislinn's page, really simple things, to try and put this into a way that anybody would understand. So, you know, Aisling is a beauty editor, so we had a lot in common. I tried to get a feel for who her followers were, and the majority are women who like beauty and they like fashion. So asking the simple question of, if you cut your finger and you went to get a plaster to put it on, what color is the plaster? Does it match your skin? Why is it called flesh color? Because it's not the color of everybody's flesh. It is the color of white flesh. When you go to buy your nude bra in Pennies, or your Spanx, or, you know, your nude sandals, why are they called nude? Because I'm not that color in my nude. So the questions that I have to ask are to open people's eyes so they can ask themselves. Because unless we recognize the status quo, we cannot challenge it. We can't challenge it. So we have to have a full understanding. You know, taking to the streets and protesting is absolutely amazing, and everybody really wants to get into action mode, which we need to keep doing. We need to keep momentum going. But I think the really important conversations that we have are, first of all, they're with ourselves, and they're with the people that are around us.
Yeah.
But unless you are ready to sit in your own discomfort of white supremacy and white privilege, which nobody has given to it, nobody has a choice in where they were born and what color they were born. You know, this is why this is everybody's issue. I think the being asked questions on what do I do next, I don't have the answers, because racism is not an issue. It's not a black people issue. It's a white people issue, because we did not cause it. We just bear the brunt of it. We are the other side of it. So the same with white supremacy, the same with white privilege. We can't give you the answer to these things because they're not. It's our fight, but we don't have the solution because we didn't cause the problem. And again, this is not to point the finger at people today. This is ancestral. This is going back through years. Irish people, white people in general, have just been born into a society where that's unequal. You know, the playing field was never level. And unless we're able to see that, we can't balance it. So my question is, what do you think you should do?
I actually like that. I like that we should be having the internal uncomfortable, and you're right, sometimes it's uncomfortable, and we need to have those conversations in order to, we cannot change the past, but we can change the future we want to live in. So
Absolutely.
I think it is up to all of us to have those conversations. And hey, this isn't a hashtag cool thing for now. This is something that needs to be forever and ongoing. Yeah. And yes,
it's not a moment.
No,
it's a movement.
Oh, I like that. You've expressed that so much better than I did. Yeah, you're right. It's not a moment, it's a movement. And I'm hoping that all of us, and it is like, it can feel, Elaine, so overwhelming for everyone involved, but it really is those small steps. And even if that first small one is you taking the opportunity to learn, to go out and chat to people, as you said, chat to yourself, and then take the actions as well, and not being afraid to ask the questions, because sometimes we do get afraid.
Of course we do, because you're afraid to say the wrong thing. I have said the wrong thing. There's a lot of new verbiage and a lot of new I am human.
Yes.
You know, I'm human. I am going to make mistakes. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to say it in the wrong way. Honest to God, really, this is the level that you're talking to here. I went to the Black Lives Matter protest a couple of weeks ago with my sign, super proud, and I spelled racism wrong. Like, I'm human. I make mistakes.
We make mistakes.
We make mistakes.
Yeah.
So you were, you were gonna you were gonna make mistakes. You're gonna say the wrong thing in the wrong way. But I think what white people need to understand is, if you are corrected, or if somebody just says, I get what you were trying to say and your intention was really good and I appreciate it, but you didn't quite hit the mark there. The response is defensive, and people defend their intention instead of just saying, actually, thanks, I'm sorry, I'll do better next time. But it's because this conversation is challenging the status quo. It's interrupting the way the world has been for 400 years. So when you get defensive, I understand it's a natural reaction, but you are making the conversation then about you and your feelings and how you feel, and not actually trying to really do the work and do better. So, if somebody stood on your toe and I said, oh, that would actually really hurt, your reaction would not be, well, I didn't mean it. It would just be to go, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I will tread a little bit more lightly next time.
Elaine, thank you. Thank you for having the discussion. And here's to massive interruption in the world now. Absolutely. Because change needs to happen, and it needs to happen now.
We are all in this together. This is not a black versus white. This is not a political issue. This is humanity. And we need to put the human back in that. And that starts with each of us. What we're all trying to do, whether we make mistakes and we stumble along the way, is we are just trying to make people feel more comfortable in the skin that they're in the country that they're in, and make the world a better place. As cheesy and as, as that might sound, that's what we are trying to do. So we are all in this together. And if we want to be equal, we have to understand that what makes us different needs to be celebrated.
I'm all for celebrating that and for celebrating you. Thank you so much, Elaine, for taking the time out to chat to me.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.